My 9-year-old son spent a few days at my wife's mother's house for summer break. When he came back, something felt off. I asked, "What's wrong?" He whispered, "Dad, don't ever go back to that house." I asked, "Why? What happened?" He silently handed me his phone. "Look at this, Dad." As I looked at the screen, my whole body froze. The silent return. The house should have been filled with summer laughter when my son returned. Instead, it was dead silent. I stood at the front door, arms open, ready to hug my 9-year-old Ethan. He didn't run into my arms like usual. No dad, no bright smile. He just walked in, head down, backpack clutched tight. "Hey, champ, you okay?" I asked gently, kneeling beside him. He paused, then looked up, eyes filled with something I'd never seen before. Fear. "Don't ever go back to that house," he whispered. Chills danced up my spine. I tried to keep my voice calm. "Why? What happened?" He didn't answer. He reached into his backpack, pulled out his phone, one I'd given him for emergency calls, and handed it to me. "Look at this, Dad." I unlocked it, and what I saw on the screen made my stomach drop. I froze. The footage I wasn't supposed to see. The video started with a shaky frame. Ethan must have hidden the phone somewhere. The angle was low, pointed slightly upward, like it had been propped against a shoe or tucked between couch cushions. The audio came first. Laughter, female, familiar. It was my wife's mother, Joanne. Then her voice turned mocking. "She thinks that boy is normal," she scoffed. "But he's weak. Slow, just like his father. No real spine." A second voice responded, sharper, colder. "My wife, I told you not to spoil him. He needs to toughen up. If a few nights here scare him, maybe he'll learn something." I stared at the screen, stunned. My wife, Ethan's mother, had said those words about our son. The camera shook again. Then the view shifted slightly, revealing Ethan in the corner of the living room. He looked so small, clutching a pillow like a shield. The women didn't know he was filming. Then came something worse. Joanne approached him. "You crying, boy? That's why your daddy's a loser. He raised you soft." She yanked the pillow away and smacked it across his face. I felt my blood boil. On screen, Ethan didn't cry. He flinched but stayed silent. Brave, stronger than they thought. The footage ended. I looked at my son sitting quietly on the couch, staring at the floor. "How long has this been happening?" I asked, trying to stay calm. "Since last year," he whispered. "You were working. She told me not to tell. Said you'd get mad at me." My fists clenched so tightly my nails dug into my palms. That was when I made a silent vow. They had no idea what I was about to do, but I was going to make sure they never hurt my son again. Not emotionally, not physically, not ever. The calm before the storm. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I stayed in the living room, phone in hand, replaying the footage over and over. Each time I watched Joanne strike my son, and each time I heard my wife mock him like he was a burden, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just emotional neglect. This was calculated cruelty. And they thought they could keep me in the dark. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to shout. I was going to burn it all down quietly and make sure they never saw it coming. The first step, documentation. The next morning, I drove Ethan to school myself. I gave him a tight hug at the gate, whispered, "Don't worry, son. I've got you now." Then I went straight to a law office. I wanted everything on record. Dates, footage, context, my wife's prior absences, the strange behavior I'd overlooked for too long. The lawyer, a quiet woman named Farah, watched the video and looked up at me grimly. "This isn't just grounds for divorce," she said. "It's evidence of child endangerment and potentially emotional abuse by both your wife and her mother." Good. That's what I wanted her to say. The second step, the house setup. Over the next few days, I acted like nothing had happened. At home, I smiled, played the devoted husband, cooked dinner, cleaned dishes. My wife barely noticed. She was glued to her phone or gossiping with her mother over video calls, thinking I was just being extra nice. She had no idea that while she chatted with her mother about weekend plans, I was installing tiny wireless cameras in our living room, kitchen, and hallway, discrete ones embedded in power outlets and smoke detectors. I wanted to capture everything just in case. The third step, my son's confession file. That weekend, while my wife was out shopping with her mother, I sat with Ethan and gently asked if he'd be willing to talk on video. He hesitated but nodded. He spoke clearly, bravely about the name-calling, the punishments, the locked doors, the time his grandmother told him he was just like his useless dad and made him sleep on the floor, the times his own mother stood by, arms crossed, saying, "That's what boys need." When the recording ended, I hugged him tightly. "You're not like me, Ethan," I said, choking back emotion. "You're better, stronger, braver, and I swear I'll protect you with everything I have." The fourth step, the trap. Then came the final move, getting them to admit everything one last time on camera. I faked a business trip, Told my wife I'd be gone for the weekend, left my car at the airport, then took a cab back and hid in the guest room with a sleeping bag and noise-canceling headphones, monitoring the live feed from my phone. By nightfall, Joanne arrived. "Where's the brat?" she barked as she walked in. "In his room," my wife sighed. "He better not start crying again." I hit record. They sat in the kitchen sipping wine and began laughing again about how Ethan was too soft and how I was too dumb to notice what really goes on. Joanne laughed and said, "Burn the boy's teddy bear if he cries again." That was the moment I stepped out of the guest room and into their stunned wine-frozen silence. The confrontation that changed everything. The wineglass slipped from Joanne's hand and shattered on the tile floor. My wife went pale, her mouth opened, but no words came out. I walked slowly across the kitchen, holding up my phone. The screen still displayed the live footage from the hidden camera in the hallway, the timestamp ticking in the corner. "I heard everything," I said flatly. "And I have everything." Joanne scoffed. "You think that little recording will scare me? You're a nobody?" I turned to my wife. "Is that what you've been teaching our son? That his father is a nobody? That abuse is love? That locking him in a closet and mocking him makes him stronger?" She tried to reach for my hand. "Please let me explain." I stepped back. "Explain to a judge or to Child Protective Services? Because you're not explaining anything to me," Joanne doubled down. And that was her mistake. "Go ahead," she barked. "Let's take it to court. You're the one who works all day while she takes care of the boy. She's the mother. You'll lose." I smiled for the first time in days. "You really don't know what I do for a living, do you, Joanne?" "I don't care. I work in digital forensics." That shut her up. "I recover deleted files, reconstruct surveillance footage, track IPs, trace hidden devices, and I specialize in documenting abuse. I've built cases like this for a living, and now I've built one against you." I placed a folder on the kitchen table. Inside were Ethan's video testimony footage from the house cameras, logs of texts and voice messages between my wife and her mother, psychological reports from Ethan's counselor, whom I had arranged a private session with earlier that week. My wife shakily sat down. Joanne glared at me with venom, but stayed silent now. She knew she had underestimated me. Calling the police was easier than I thought. I dialed calmly. "I'd like to report a domestic abuse situation involving a minor," I said. "I have evidence." "Yes, I can provide everything on file." The officer on the line took my address and assured me they were dispatching someone. Joanne suddenly panicked. "You don't have to do this. I'll leave. I'll go. Just don't ruin everything." I turned to her slowly. "You ruined everything the day you laid your hands on my child," and then quietly to my wife. "And you the day you stood there and let it happen." When the police arrived, Joanne tried to fake calm. She smiled like she was the victim, claimed I was fabricating everything. But the moment I played the kitchen audio and handed them the USB stick with the rest of the files, the officers turned cold. She laughed when my son cried. "I told them, your son was locked in a closet," one officer repeated. Stunned. "We'll be calling child services immediately." They took Joanne away. My wife wasn't arrested, but the officers informed her that she'd be under investigation and that a temporary restraining order was being placed for Ethan's protection. Until the court hearing, she was not to contact either of us. The house felt empty after they left, but for the first time in years, it also felt safe. Courtroom storm and custody wars. The courtroom was sterile and quiet, but tension buzzed like static in the air. I sat straight, wearing a black suit, clutching the folder that had become my armor, evidence, statements, and Ethan's truth. To my left sat my lawyer, calm and methodical. To the right, Joanne, smug despite being under investigation, and beside her, my wife, looking haggarded and distant, dressed more for sympathy than justice. Across from me, Ethan sat with a child advocate, his little hands clenched tightly in his lap. He avoided everyone's gaze except mine. He smiled when he saw me. That was all I needed. "You don't deserve that, child." The judge was an older woman with piercing eyes and no patience for theatrics. She asked for the evidence first. We played the kitchen audio, then the hallway video, then read the counselor's assessment. We showed the logs of messages between my wife and Joanne, mocking Ethan's softness, calling him useless, and joking about the closet cure. Joanne's face went white. My wife looked like she'd aged 10 years in 5 minutes. Then came the final blow. Ethan's recorded statement. "I don't want to go back there. Grandma scares me. She says I'm weak. She said if I cry again, she'll put me in the box." Mommy laughed. "She didn't help me. You could have heard a pin drop." The judge's verdict was swift and brutal. "I have seen many cases of emotional abuse," she began, "but rarely do I see such callous disregard for a child's well-being from the very people meant to protect him." She turned to Joanne. "You are hereby barred from any contact with Ethan, effective immediately." Then to my wife, "You enabled it. You let it happen. For now, you are to remain under supervised visitation only, pending a full psychological evaluation and parenting review." She looked at me. "Mr. Carter, You are granted full physical and legal custody of Ethan. I closed my eyes. Relief flooded through me. Ethan's advocate whispered the news into his ear. He leapt up and ran to me, arms wrapping around my waist. I'm safe now, he whispered. I knelt. Forever. My wife tried one last thing, but it backfired. 2 weeks later, she sent me a long email begging to reconcile. I was manipulated. I didn't know it would go that far. Please don't let our marriage die, I replied with only one sentence. You stood and watched while your mother broke our son's spirit. There's no coming back from that. She filed for supervised visitation rights, but Ethan refused to go. The court didn't force him. Her visits were reduced to letters. She sent 2. He never replied. Joanne tried to sue me for defamation. It got thrown out in less than 10 minutes. My lawyer laughed on the way out of the courthouse. She has no case. She destroyed herself. A new beginning. We moved to a new town, new school, new memories. Ethan started therapy. Slowly. He began smiling more, sleeping better, laughing again. One night he asked me, Dad, why didn't you leave earlier? I hugged him tightly. Because I thought I was protecting you by staying. But now I know real protection means walking away when people won't change. He nodded. I'm glad you walked. So was I. Epilogue. The phone call that tried to rewrite everything. It had been nearly a year since we left our old life behind. Ethan was thriving, top of his class, captain of his school's junior robotics club, and recently awarded for kindest student by his teacher. Every night before bed, we'd read a few pages from his favorite mystery novels, and he'd fall asleep without the nightmares that once tormented him. I thought the past was finally behind us until one rainy Thursday evening, my phone rang. It was my ex-wife. I hesitated for a moment before answering. Her voice was soft, shaky. I'm in a women's shelter, she whispered. I left my mother. I've been in therapy. I'm trying to fix everything I destroyed. I said nothing. Please, I'd like to see him. Just once, not to confuse him. Just to tell him I'm sorry. I looked at Ethan sitting cross-legged on the couch, laughing at a silly cartoon. He was safe, whole, healing. I answered carefully. You're not ready. And he's not ready to see the woman who stood by and did nothing. There was silence on the other end. Then quiet sobs. I understand, she said. I just hope someday he won't hate me. I didn't reply because that wasn't mine to decide. Later that night, Ethan asked who called. I looked at him, thought about it, then smiled faintly. Someone from the past. But we don't have to go back there. He nodded and snuggled closer. And just like that, the past stayed where it belonged, buried behind us, while the future stood open, full of light, laughter, and the bond between a father and son no monster could ever break again. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Or should the storm have raged harder? Drop your verdict below. I read every single one. Hit like if you crave justice and share this story with someone who needs its fire. Subscribe to because Daily Scroll stories here betrayals don't sleep. They hunt their owners. Every shadow hides a reckoning. Every mask breaks and every betrayal is answered. Stay sharp. Stay unbroken. Stay tuned.